Let me ask you something. If you stopped texting them first, would the conversation even exist? That question isn't just about texting. It's about effort, respect, and emotional balance. Because the truth is, the person who always texts first is usually the one holding the relationship together. What if the silence you're afraid of is actually the clarity you need? When you always text first in a relationship or dating situation, you inadvertently create an energy imbalance. In human interactions, especially romantic ones, the dynamic between giving and receiving plays a crucial role. When one person is constantly reaching out, initiating conversations, making plans, or checking in, it sets a tone where they are the emotional driver of the connection. Over time, this can become draining and even demoralizing, especially if the other person isn't matching that effort. What often goes unnoticed is that this consistent pattern of being the one to initiate sends a subconscious message: I need your attention more than you need mine. Whether intentional or not, this places you in a lower position of power in the dynamic, and power imbalances are rarely healthy in relationships. When you step back and stop being the first to text, you shift this energy. Instead of projecting neediness or dependence on their responses, you create space. This space is important because it gives the other person the opportunity to step into the role of initiator. It allows them to demonstrate their interest and effort without being constantly prompted. It's like pulling back just enough to see if they'll lean in. If they do, it speaks volumes about their willingness to invest in the relationship. If they don't, it tells you something just as important. This shift also helps re-establish your self-respect. You begin to operate from a place of confidence rather than insecurity. You're no longer performing or overcompensating in hopes of maintaining someone's attention. Instead, you're valuing your time and energy enough to wait and see if it will be returned naturally. That inner shift, from chasing validation to expecting mutuality, radiates outward. People notice when your energy changes. There's something magnetic about someone who isn't desperate for attention but is open to genuine connection. This kind of shift changes how others perceive you, and in turn, changes what kind of treatment you tolerate. Moreover, when you always text first, you can end up nurturing a dynamic that was never really reciprocal. The other person may have become comfortable in their passivity, knowing they don't need to make much effort to keep you around. When you stop, you disrupt that expectation. You stop training them to do the bare minimum. They either adapt by rising to meet your level of engagement, or they fade out. Either outcome is revealing and useful. Ultimately, shifting the energy isn't about playing games or manipulating. It's about realigning your behavior with your self-worth. It's about creating an environment where mutual effort can thrive instead of one-sided labor. It invites more balance, more clarity, and more emotional honesty. And it allows you to attract relationships where communication and effort are shared, not just expected from you alone. When you stop texting first, one of the most powerful and revealing things that happens is that you finally get a clear picture of the other person's true interest level. It's easy to assume someone is interested when they reply quickly, send funny messages, or seem engaged in conversation, especially when you're always the one starting it. But consistent responsiveness isn't the same as genuine effort. It's easy for someone to reply when prompted, but far more telling when you give them the space to initiate. When you stop reaching out first, the illusion fades and reality sets in. You begin to notice whether the connection was built on mutual interest or simply on your persistence. This moment of silence acts as a test. It's not about being manipulative or playing hard to get. It's about allowing someone to show their true colors. If they don't notice your absence or make any effort to reach out, that says a lot. It reveals that they may have been passively enjoying the attention without ever being fully invested. That kind of dynamic is more common than we like to admit, and we often don't see it because our own actions mask the truth. We think we have a strong connection, but in reality, we've been keeping it alive all on our own. When someone truly values you, they don't need to be reminded that you exist. They don't wait to be nudged or prompted into interaction. Genuine interest naturally expresses itself through action, through thoughtfulness, consistency, and initiative. When you stop texting first, you make room for these signs to appear, or not. And as painful as it can be to realize someone isn't as into you as you hoped, it's also incredibly liberating. It gives you clarity. You're no longer stuck wondering if they'd ever make the effort, because now they have the chance to. And whether they do or not tells you everything you need to know. This insight is especially important in the early stages of dating or getting to know someone. Those first few weeks are when patterns are formed and expectations are set. If you always do the initiating, it's easy for them to set into a passive role and for you to feel like you're constantly trying to earn their time or attention. But when you stop, you allow the dynamic to reset. You take back emotional responsibility that was never meant to be yours alone. And in that stillness, you find the truth, sometimes affirming, sometimes disappointing, but always necessary. Ultimately, stepping back from initiating communication is an act of trust, not in the other person, but in yourself. It's trusting that you're worthy of effort. It's trusting that if someone is truly interested, they'll show up without needing to be pulled, and when they don't, you're strong enough to let them go. Not because you didn't care, but because you finally saw how little they did. When you make the decision to stop texting first, something subtle but incredibly important begins to happen. You gain clarity. In the noise of modern communication, especially in dating and early relationships, it's easy to get caught in a loop of assumptions, hopes, and mixed signals. You find yourself rereading messages, analyzing tone, wondering if they're busy or just uninterested. When you're the one constantly reaching out, you're stuck in a cycle of doubt. You question everything. Did I say too much? Am I being too eager? Why aren't they responding the way I hoped? This kind of mental spinning creates emotional confusion, draining your energy and self-esteem. It blurs the line between reality and the story you're telling yourself about how things are going. But when you stop texting first, the confusion starts to lift. You step out of the fog and into a space of clarity because you remove your own behaviors as a variable. You're no longer feeding the interaction or keeping it alive. Instead, you allow the natural course of their behavior to unfold, and in that stillness, the truth becomes much easier to see. If they reach out, you know they're interested. If they don't, you know where you stand. There's no more decoding or second guessing. You're simply observing reality rather than trying to control it. That clarity can feel jarring at first, especially if you've grown accustomed to the excitement or anxiety of constant messaging. But over time, it becomes grounding. It brings a sense of peace that only honesty, no matter how uncomfortable, can provide. What's even more powerful is the way this clarity affects your emotional well-being. Instead of being trapped in the limbo of what if, you begin to see people for who they are, not who you hope they might be. You stop writing stories in your head based on potential and start evaluating based on consistent action. That kind of mental shift not only saves you time and heartache, it also helps you make better decisions. You're able to move on faster if the interest isn't mutual, or invest more confidently if it is. You stop feeling like you're chasing something and instead start moving toward relationships that are more balanced and fulfilling. There's also an internal clarity that grows in this space. You start to understand more about your own needs, boundaries, and expectations. You realize what feels good and what feels draining. You start recognizing when you're being respected and when you're being strung along. It's easy to ignore those signals when you're distracted by the chase, but when you stop initiating and just observe, you become far more in tune with yourself. That awareness becomes a compass. It helps you navigate not just one relationship, but all the ones that follow. Gaining clarity in this way is not always comfortable, but it's deeply empowering. It replaces emotional noise with truth. And that truth, even when it's disappointing, always points you in the direction of something healthier. When you decide to stop texting first, one of the most profound changes that occurs is within yourself. You begin to build self-respect. It might not feel like a big act at first, but it is. Choosing not to chase, not to initiate every conversation, and not to be the one always reaching out is a quiet internal declaration that your time, energy, and presence are valuable. In a world where people are constantly encouraged to stay connected, where not hearing from someone can stir up anxiety or self-doubt, resisting the urge to initiate can feel unnatural or even wrong. But that resistance is exactly where growth begins. With every moment you choose to wait instead of pursue, you are telling yourself, I am enough without constantly proving it. Self-respect is not just about demanding good treatment from others, it's about how you treat yourself. When you always text first, especially with someone who barely reciprocates, you often slip into a mindset where your worth is measured by someone else's response. You become hyper-aware of their availability, their mood, their interest level, and you shape your actions to try to please or provoke a reaction. This can feel like effort, but it's often anxiety disguised as care. It's a pattern of self-abandonment in pursuit of validation. Stepping back from that, even slightly, is an act of reclaiming your sense of value. You stop outsourcing your worth to someone's reply time or enthusiasm. As you refrain from reaching out, you start to notice that you're not falling apart without constant connection. In fact, you begin to enjoy the stillness, the control, and the shift in focus. You spend less time waiting on a reply and more time observing your own thoughts, feelings, and desires. You realize that it's not rejection you're afraid of, it's the silence that comes with facing yourself. But once you do face yourself, and once you accept that your attention is a gift, you begin to carry yourself differently. You become less reactive, less desperate, and more grounded in what you actually want and need from others. This practice of restraint becomes a mirror. It reflects how much you've grown and how much you're willing to stand by yourself even in uncertainty. It allows you to say without words, if you want me in your life, you'll show up too. It shifts the dynamic from one-sided effort to mutual responsibility. And even if the other person never picks up the slack, you walk away stronger because you honored yourself. You didn't beg for attention. You didn't lose your identity in the pursuit of closeness. You stayed still and let the truth reveal itself, and in doing so, you held your head higher. That kind of self-respect becomes unshakable. It doesn't need to be loud or aggressive. It lives in your choices, your boundaries, and your quiet refusal to be someone's afterthought. It turns silence into strength and space into self-worth, and from there, better connections begin. When you stop texting first, a shift happens, not just in your internal world, but also in how people respond to you without realizing it. Many of us teach others how to treat us based on what we allow, what we tolerate, and what we reinforce. When you're always initiating, always checking in, and always putting in the effort to keep the connection going, you're often signaling that you're willing to accept minimal effort in return. While your intentions might come from a place of care or interest, the message being received can be very different. Over time, this creates a dynamic where the other person doesn't feel the need to step up, because they've learned you'll do it for them. But when you stop, the dynamic shifts. You begin to attract better behavior because you stop rewarding inconsistency, laziness, or emotional unavailability. People rise to the standards you set, not the ones you talk about, but the ones you enforce through your actions. When you no longer hand out your time and attention so freely, others are forced to make a choice. They either step up or step away. Those who truly value you will recognize the gap and respond by matching your effort. They'll become more attentive, more present, and more intentional. And those who are only half in will slowly fade out, making room for healthier connections. This change in behavior isn't just about romantic interest. It's about how others begin to view you overall. When people see that you are someone who doesn't chase or beg for attention, but instead gives space for mutual engagement, they start to respect you differently. They understand that your time isn't available to just anyone, and that earns a deeper level of regard. You're no longer the fallback option or the emotional safety net. You become someone whose presence carries value, someone whose attention is earned, not expected. Furthermore, you start to notice a change in your own standards. You become more aware of what respectful, balanced communication looks like. You stop being entertained by people who play games or disappear for days only to return with vague interest. Your tolerance for inconsistency decreases, not because you're bitter, but because you've learned to recognize your own worth. This clarity acts like a filter, naturally repelling those who aren't willing to meet you where you are. And in return, it attracts people who appreciate consistency, effort, and emotional honesty. The energy you project when you stop overgiving is very different from the energy you have when you're constantly trying to maintain someone's attention. It's calmer, more grounded, and far more attractive. People are drawn to those who seem whole on their own, who don't depend on others to feel validated or secure. That doesn't mean you stop caring or become closed off. It means you give others the opportunity to show who they are and how they choose to treat you, without you constantly prompting them. And the result is a new quality of connection built on respect, intention, and mutual desire. ChatGPT said, when you stop texting first, something quietly powerful begins to happen. You make space for the right person. It might not feel that way at first. You might feel a sudden emptiness, a quiet stretch of time that used to be filled with reaching out, checking your phone, or waiting for a reply. But in that silence, in that pause, you're doing something incredibly important. You're clearing out the emotional clutter created by chasing someone who isn't fully meeting you halfway. You're removing the noise, the mixed signals, the half-hearted interactions that drain your energy and leave you second-guessing your worth. That space you create is not just empty. It's open, and that openness is what invites something better in. When you constantly pursue someone, especially when the effort is not mutual, you're not just filling up your time. You're filling up your emotional bandwidth. Your thoughts, your attention, your hopes are caught up in someone who may not be thinking about you in the same way. That imbalance doesn't just keep you stuck. It keeps you unavailable. You're unavailable to better connections, to genuine interest, to someone who's actually looking for what you have to offer. It's hard to see this in the moment because part of you is focused on potential, what it could be, what it used to feel like, or what you're afraid to lose. But potential isn't presence, and it's certainly not partnership. Making space means stepping away from the maybes and waiting for the yes. This shift also changes how you show up in your own life. When you're not preoccupied with managing someone else's interest level, you begin to reconnect with yourself. You gain time, energy, and clarity. You start doing things that make you feel alive, confident, and centered. You're no longer emotionally depleted by overextending. Instead, you become rooted in your own worth. And from that place, you radiate something different. Something that draws in people who are aligned with you, not people who need convincing. The right person isn't looking to be chased. They're not confused about how they feel or waiting for you to prove yourself. They're simply looking for someone who's available, intentional, and emotionally mature enough to show up. You can't receive that kind of person if you're emotionally occupied with someone who's not. Making space also means practicing patience. It means trusting that your silence, your decision not to reach out, isn't passive, it's powerful. It's a form of self-respect and emotional readiness. It allows the wrong person to exit without resistance and the right one to enter without confusion. It allows you to recognize what genuine effort looks like and to reject anything less. And most importantly, it makes room for love that is not built on chasing or convincing, but on mutual desire, shared effort, and real connection. The right person won't need you to text first every time. They'll be just as eager to meet you in the middle, right where you belong.